At my own 60th birthday dinner, my son announced he was putting me in an assisted living facility and seizing control of my company. He saw me as a frail old man, an obstacle to his inheritance. He smiled, thinking he'd won, but I just smiled back because the trap was already set. Before we dive into this intense story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. We'd also love to know where you're all tuning in from. Let us know in the comments. The clinking of cutlery on fine china had softened to a gentle hum, the comfortable sound of a family meal winding down. The private room at the Embers, our city's finest steakhouse, was filled with the warm glow of candlelight and the faint, sweet scent of vanilla from the birthday cake sitting before me. 60 candles. It felt like a ridiculous number, a forest fire in miniature. My lungs, recently recovered from a nasty bout of pneumonia, felt a phantom tightness just looking at them. "Make a wish, Dad," my son Ethan said, his voice smooth and practiced. His wife Vanessa sat beside him, her perfectly sculpted smile reflecting the flickering lights. She looked every bit the part of the supportive daughter-in-law, a portrait of grace and elegance in a silk dress the color of money. I looked at their faces, my son and his wife, the two people who were meant to be my future, my legacy. For a fleeting moment, the warmth of the room felt genuine. I thought of my late wife, Elena, and how much she would have loved this. She had been the heart of our family, the glue that held us all together. Since her passing 5 years ago, I had tried to fill that role, tried to be both father and mother to a son who was already a grown man. I took a deep breath, preparing to extinguish the small constellation of flames. But before I could, Ethan cleared his throat, a sound that was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. It was a deliberate, performative noise, a signal that a speech was forthcoming. I paused, my breath held. "Before you do that, Dad," Ethan began, placing his hand gently on my arm. The gesture felt proprietary, not affectionate. "Vanessa and I have been talking, and we've been very worried about you." I felt a cold knot form in the pit of my stomach. This was not the tone of a loving son about to offer a heartfelt birthday tribute. This was the tone of a boardroom executive about to announce a hostile takeover. Vanessa nodded, her expression a careful mask of concern. "Your health scare was a real wake-up call for all of us, Robert," she said, using my first name as she always did when she was trying to position herself as my peer rather than my daughter-in-law. "You've worked so hard your entire life. You've built an empire. You deserve to rest." The word empire hung in the air, glittering and venomous. My company, Harris Precision Works, was no empire. It was my life's work, a legacy I'd built from nothing, a place that had provided for hundreds of families over 3 decades. It was a part of me. "What are you getting at, Ethan?" I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the sudden dread that was creeping up my spine. Ethan squeezed my arm, his grip a little too tight. "Dad, I've found a great assisted living facility for you. It's top of the line. Gardens, activities, 24-hour care. It's the perfect place for you to relax and enjoy your retirement without the stress of running the company or managing this big, empty house." The words hit me like physical blows. Assisted living. He spoke of my home, the home I'd built with Alina, where we'd raised him, as a big, empty house. He spoke of my life's work as a stress I needed to be relieved of. I stared at him, at my own son, and saw a stranger looking back. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, the young man whose college tuition I had paid with long hours on the factory floor, was gone. In his place was a predator with my son's eyes. He wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest. "Effective immediately, I'll be stepping up as interim CEO. I'll be handling the sale of your company. I've already had preliminary talks with a few investment groups. I'll make sure you get a price that secures your comfort for the rest of your years." Silence descended upon the table. The 60 flames on my cake seemed to mock me, each one a tiny, flickering testament to a year I had spent building a life he was now trying to dismantle in 60 seconds. He had done this here on my 60th birthday in public to box me in, to make it seem as though any resistance would be the ungrateful rambling of a confused old man. He thought he was being clever. He thought he had me cornered. A profound, aching sadness washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. It was followed by something else, something cold and hard as steel: resolve. They had mistaken my recent illness for weakness. They had mistaken my love for complacency. I looked fr. Ethan's smug, expectant face to Vanessa's triumphant smirk, which she quickly tried to hide behind a facade of gentle sympathy. They thought the game was over. They didn't know I had already made my move. Slowly, I pulled my arm from Ethan's grasp. I looked at the cake, at the 60 little lights dancing in the darkness. I took a deep, steadying breath, not of a man defeated, but of a man who had already won. I blew, and in one long, sustained exhale, I extinguished every single flame, plunging the table into a momentary gloom before the restaurant's ambient light reasserted itself. I leaned back in my chair and smiled, a genuine calm and, I imagine, terrifying smile. Tomorrow morning, my son would walk into his office ready to play king, but the castle had already been sold. The betrayal was staggering, but the checkmate would be legendary. The car ride home was a study in suffocating silence. Ethan drove my sedan, his hands gripping the wheel at 10 and 2, a perfect posture of control that felt entirely rehearsed. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing back at me in the rearview mirror, her eyes glittering with a mixture of pity and impatience. They had delivered their verdict, and now they were merely transporting the condemned. "The facility is called Willow Creek Gardens," Vanessa said, her voice bright and brittle, slicing through the quiet. "The grounds are just beautiful. We took a tour last week. They have a putting green, Robert, you'd like that." I didn't play golf. She knew I didn't play golf. My hobbies were my workshop, my antique clocks, the intricate machinery of my business. The putting green wasn't for me, it was for her. It was a talking point, a glossy feature in a brochure designed to assuage any guilt she might have felt, assuming she was capable of such an emotion. "And the staff is wonderful," Ethan added, his eyes fixed on the road. "They handle everything. Meals, medication management, housekeeping, it's all taken care of. You won't have to worry about a thing." They spoke of my future as if it were a product they had just purchased, ticking off its features with the detached enthusiasm of a salesperson. They weren't discussing my life, they were justifying their decision. Every word was a carefully chosen anesthetic meant to numb me into compliance. "We'll start by packing up your personal belongings this weekend," Vanessa continued, her tone suggesting this was a generous act of charity. "We'll need to get the house staged for sale quickly. The market is very hot right now." My house, Elinor's Rose Garden. The notch on the kitchen doorframe marking Ethan's height from age 4 to 14. The study where I'd spent countless nights sketching out the designs that built our company. All of it reduced to a hot market opportunity. I remained silent, letting their words wash over me. It was important that I hear the full scope of their plan, the chilling efficiency of their betrayal. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The tour, the research, the conversations with investment groups. It all must have started around the time I was in the hospital, gasping for breath, my body fighting off the pneumonia that had nearly taken me. While I was at my weakest, my son was plotting to discard me. My mind was a strange, serene ocean in the midst of their storm. I felt the hurt, of course, a deep seismic crack in my soul, but my emotions were being overridden by a cold, clear sense of purpose. They had made a fatal miscalculation. They were so focused on the prize, on the company and the house and the money, that they had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just a sick old man, I was a strategist. I was the man who built Harris Precision Works by outthinking and outworking competitors twice our size. They had forgotten one crucial thing about the man who taught them to play chess. I always thought 5 moves ahead. "We know this is a lot to take in, Dad," Ethan said, his voice softening into a tone of condescending sympathy as he pulled into my driveway. "But trust us, this is what's best." I finally spoke, my voice raspy but firm. "I trust you'll handle everything then." Relief washed over their faces. It was so palpable I could almost taste it. My apparent capitulation was the final piece of their plan falling into place. They had their victory. "Of course, Dad will take care of everything," Ethan said, turning off the engine. Vanessa unbuckled her seatbelt. "We'll pop in tomorrow to get started, okay, Robert? We'll bring boxes." "That will be unnecessary," I said calmly. They both froze, looking back at me. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Ethan's face. I gave them a thin, weary smile. "Don't trouble yourselves. I'm sure you have a very big day ahead of you tomorrow, son. You should rest up." My words on the surface were agreeable, but they hung in the air with a weight that they, in their arrogance, couldn't quite decipher. They mistook it for resignation. They saw a tired old man surrendering to his fate. They didn't hear the final, quiet click of the trap being sprung. They helped me out of the car, 2 dutiful captors leading their prisoner to his cell. As I walked up the path to my front door, the key feeling solid and real in my hand, their parting words echoed in the cool night air. "Good night, Dad. Get some sleep." Oh, I would sleep. I would sleep the sound, peaceful sleep of a man whose affairs were in perfect order. They, on the other hand, were about to step into a waking nightmare of their own making. The house was quiet when they left. The silence should have been a comfort, but tonight it was heavy, filled with the ghosts of happier times. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my hand trailing along the back of the sofa where Alina and I used to sit, her feet tucked under a blanket as we talked about our day. In the dining room, the long oak table, a gift from her parents, stood gleaming under the chandelier. It had hosted decades of holidays, birthdays, and Sunday dinners. It had seen Ethan grow from a boy who could barely see over the tabletop to the man who now saw me as an inconvenience to be cleared away. I had poured my life into two things, my family and my company. After Alina passed, the two became inextricably linked. Harris Precision Works wasn't just a business. It was the engine that would provide for Ethan and his future family, the legacy I would one day pass on to him. I had made him vice president of operations 5 years ago, hoping to groom him, to teach him not just the mechanics of the business but its soul. The commitment to quality, the loyalty to our employees, the integrity that was our hallmark. But I had made a critical error in judgment. I had given Ethan the reward before he had earned the wisdom. He'd had a privileged upbringing, a world away from my own. I started on the factory floor of a company much like my own, my hands greasy, my back aching. I learned every machine, every process, every link in the supply chain from the ground up. Ethan started in a corner office with a view, his hands clean, his path cleared by me. He saw the company not as a living entity to be nurtured, but as an asset to be leveraged. The change in him had been gradual, but it accelerated the day he brought Vanessa home. On the surface, she was perfect, polished, intelligent, and charming. She ran her own small interior design business, catering to the city's elite. She spoke of color palettes, fabric swatches, and property values with a breathless passion. But beneath the chic exterior, I sensed a deep and unsettling avarice. Her admiration for our family seemed to be directly proportional to our net worth. When she looked at our home, she didn't see the memories, she saw the square footage. When she spoke of the company, it wasn't with pride in its craftsmanship, but with a keen interest in its quarterly profits and market valuation. She was a woman who understood the price of everything and the value of nothing. She began to whisper in Ethan's ear, planting seeds of discontent. I would overhear snippets of their conversations when they thought I was out of earshot. "Robert is too conservative," she'd say. "This company could be so much bigger if he'd just take some risks." Or, "Imagine this house with a more modern aesthetic, Ethan. We could do so much with it." She was slowly reframing his inheritance not as a future gift, but as a present opportunity he was being denied. Ethan, eager to prove himself and besotted with her, absorbed it all. His respect for my experience began to curdle into resentment. He saw my caution as fear, my prudence as a lack of vision. He started referring to our most loyal, long-serving employees as dead weight. He pushed for risky ventures, high-leverage deals that prioritized short-term flash over long-term stability. Each time I vetoed one of his reckless proposals, the gulf between us widened. He saw it as me holding him back, unable to let go. I saw it as me protecting the company from his greed and immaturity. The final straw had been my illness. The pneumonia had hit me hard. For 2 weeks I was hospitalized, and for another month after I was forced to work from home, my energy depleted. It was the first time in my life I had ever been truly vulnerable. I had needed my son's support. Instead, he saw an opportunity. He and Vanessa would visit, their faces etched with that same counterfeit concern I'd seen tonight. They brought smoothies and magazines, all the while taking stock. I could see their eyes scanning my study, my files, as if they were already measuring the place for new curtains. Ethan would give me updates on the company, glossing over details, his tone suggesting he was handling a crisis I was no longer equipped to manage. He was auditioning for the role of CEO, and he had cast me as the feeble, retiring monarch. It was during the period of recovery, as my lungs slowly cleared and my strength returned, that the full ugly picture came into focus. My son was not waiting for me to hand him the keys. He was preparing to snatch them from my hand. And I realized, with a sorrow so profound it felt like a second illness, that I could not give him the company. To do so would be to betray every loyal employee, every promise I had ever made, and the very memory of his mother, who believed in building things that last. He would have sold it for parts within a year, taking the cash and leaving a legacy of ruin. So I had to save it, and I had to save him from himself. The only way to do that was with a lesson so severe, so unforgettable, that it would either forge him into a new man or break him completely. It was a terrible gamble for a father to take, but it was the only move I had left. The betrayal wasn't just his plan for me tonight, it was the slow, creeping erosion of everything I thought we had. Tonight was merely the final, public declaration of a war he had started long ago. The decision was not made in a single, dramatic moment. It was a slow, painful conclusion reached over weeks of observation from the forced quiet of my sickbed. As my body healed, my mind sharpened, and I began to see the subtle signs I had previously missed, blinded by fatherly affection. It began with phone calls. Ethan, thinking I was asleep, would take calls in the hallway outside my bedroom. The hushed, urgent tones, the use of phrases like maximizing shareholder value and streamlining the transition were not the words of a son managing a company for his ailing father. They were the words of a corporate raider closing in on a target. My company was the target. I was the shareholder whose value he was planning to maximize right out the door. One afternoon, I feigned sleep when Vanessa came into the room with a tray. She placed it on the bedside table and then, believing I was oblivious, she quietly picked up a framed photo of Alina and me from my desk. I watched through slitted eyelids as she turned it over in her hands, her expression not one of fondness, but of cool appraisal, as if it were an item in an estate sale. She was assessing my life's artifacts for their market price. That was the moment the sadness began to harden into strategy. My first call wasn't to a doctor for a follow-up, but to my lawyer, David. David, I'd said, my voice still weak but resolute, I need you to draw up a list of all potential buyers for Harris Precision Works and put Thorne Industries at the top. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Thorne, Robert Marcus Thorne is your biggest rival. You've been competing with him for 30 years. That's why he's the only one who will understand, I replied. He's a builder, David, not a butcher. He respects the craft. He'll take care of my people. And so began the secret phase of my life, a clandestine operation run from my own study. While Ethan and Vanessa were downstairs, discussing paint swatches for the living room they already considered theirs, I was upstairs on encrypted video calls, negotiating the sale of my life's work. My first meeting with Marcus Thorne was tense. We met at a neutral location, a private club neither of us frequented. We were old adversaries, men who knew each other through reputation and fierce market competition. He was a tall, imposing man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Robert, he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, his gaze direct. I'll be honest, I was surprised to get the call. I never thought I'd see the day you'd be willing to sell. Circumstances change, Marcus, I said, gesturing for him to sit. I'm not as young as I used to be. It's time to think about the future of the company, a future that ensures it continues to stand for quality. I laid out my terms. I didn't haggle aggressively on the price. The number David had researched was fair and Marcus knew it. My focus was on the non-financial clauses. I wanted a guarantee that the factory would not be shut down. I wanted a commitment to retain all employees with under 10 years of service for a minimum of 2 years. And then I came to the most important part. There's one more condition, I said, leaning forward. It's a deal breaker, it's about my son. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Ethan, your VP of Ops, I know of him. Ethan will be part of the company you acquire, I stated, and you must agree to keep him on. A flicker of understanding or perhaps suspicion crossed his face. You want me to guarantee his job? Is he that good? You must guarantee his employment, I clarified, but you must demote him. Not to a manager, not to a supervisor. I want him on the factory floor, an entry-level position. I want him to learn what it's like to punch a clock, to get his hands dirty, to understand the work that creates the value he's so eager to cash in on. He'll be given the same pay, me hours, and the same opportunities for advancement as any other new hire. No more, no less. Marcus Thorne stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. He was a shrewd businessman, and he was piecing together the unspoken story, the family drama playing out behind the corporate deal. He saw the pain and the purpose in my eyes. He's planning to push you out, isn't he? Marcus said, not as a question but as a statement. I simply nodded. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow, grim smile forming on his lips. It was not a smile of mockery but of respect, the respect of one old warrior for another. My own son is a doctor, he mused. Thank heavens, this kind of thing, it's ugly. He looked me straight in the eye. It's a highly unusual condition, Robert, but I understand what you're doing. It's a harsh lesson. It's a necessary one, I said. He needs to understand what this business is built on. It's built on the sweat and skill of the people on that floor. He's forgotten that, or maybe he never knew it at all. All right, Robert, Marcus said, extending his hand across the table. You have a deal. I'll have my legal team add the Ethan clause to the sale agreement. We'll make it ironclad. We signed the papers a week before my 60th birthday. The finality of my signature felt both like a death and a rebirth. I was letting go of my past to secure its future. The trap was now officially set. All that was left was for the target to walk into it. The birthday dinner was Ethan's idea, his grand stage for my public execution. I simply let him set the scene, knowing full well that the final act had already been written by me. Before I resorted to the drastic measure of selling the company, I had tried to reason with him. I had tried to salvage the son I thought I knew. This memory, more than any other, was the one that solidified my resolve, erasing any lingering doubt about the path I had chosen. It was about 2 months before my illness, a crisp autumn afternoon. I had called Ethan into my office to discuss the quarterly reports. The numbers were solid, a testament to the steady, reliable work our team produced. But Ethan was agitated. He paced in front of my desk, a sheaf of papers in his hand, his face flushed with a zeal I had come to mistrust. "Dad, we're stagnating," he declared, tossing the proposal onto my desk. "Solid is not spectacular. We should be growing, acquiring, dominating." I picked up the papers. It was a proposal for a new line of products, flashy consumer goods far outside our area of expertise in industrial components. It involved taking on an enormous amount of debt to acquire a smaller, trend-focused company and retool a significant portion of our factory. The projections were wildly optimistic, based on fleeting market trends and buzzwords. "Ethan, this is not who we are," I said calmly, trying to gently steer him back to reality. "Our strength is in precision, in reliability. We build parts that keep industries moving. We don't chase fads." "We chase profits," he retorted, his voice rising. "This is the future. You're stuck in the past, Dad. This isn't the 1980s anymore. You have to spend money to make money." "This isn't spending, son. This is gambling," I said, my tone hardening. "This plan is reckless. It exposes the company to unacceptable levels of risk. It would threaten the jobs of people who have been with us for decades. The answer is no." His face contorted with fury. "The answer is no, just like that. You didn't even consider it. You won't even listen to me." "I did listen," I countered. "I listened, and I heard a plan that was all sizzle and no steak. It's a plan driven by ego, not by sound business sense." Just then the door to my office opened, and Vanessa swept in holding 2 cups of coffee. She had a knack for appearing at moments of high tension, a silent partner in Ethan's ambitions. She took in the "seen my firm" expression, Ethan's barely controlled rage, and immediately moved to his side, placing a soothing hand on his arm. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her gaze flicking towards me laced with accusation. "Your father just shot down my proposal without a second thought," Ethan seethed. "He called me an egotist." Vanessa looked at me, her brow furrowed in that practiced expression of disappointment. "Robert, Ethan has been working on this for months. He's trying to build a future here for all of us. You have to be willing to evolve." The two of them stood there, a united front against my old-fashioned ways. They saw me as a relic, a stubborn old man clinging to the throne, unable to accept the brilliant vision of the young prince. They couldn't see that I was the guardian at the gate, protecting the kingdom from the prince's own folly. "My decision is final," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "We are not leveraging the future of this company on a whim." Ethan snatched the proposal from my desk. "Fine," he aspy. At his voice dripping with contempt, "Keep your little workshop. Run it into the ground with your prudence. One day you won't be here to say no, and when that day comes, I'll finally be able to run this company the way it deserves to be run." He stormed out, Vanessa gliding silently behind him, casting one last, pitying look over her shoulder. That look was the most revealing part of the entire exchange. It wasn't angry. It was the look of someone watching a problem that would, sooner or later, solve itself. I sat alone in my office, the silence ringing in my ears. He had said it. "One day you won't be here to say no." He wasn't talking about my retirement. He was talking about my mortality. My own son was waiting for me to die so he could cash in my legacy. That was the moment the last vestiges of hope for a gentle succession died. It was the day I realized that my son didn't want to learn from me. He wanted to replace me. He didn't want to inherit a legacy. He wanted to liquidate an asset. The confrontation had revealed everything. He had laid his cards on the table, and they were stained with greed and disrespect. From that day forward, I knew I had to draw up a new hand to play. The night after my birthday dinner was long. I didn't spend it sleeping. I sat in my leather armchair in the study, the one place in the house that still felt entirely my own, and let the events of the evening settle. The initial shock had receded, replaced by a profound and weary certainty. I had made the right choice. Every detail of their plan, as they'd laid it out so clinically in the restaurant, was another piece of evidence confirming my diagnosis of their character. This wasn't a misguided attempt to care for an aging parent, it was a coup. The stakes had escalated beyond just the company's future. It was about my dignity, my autonomy, my very identity as a man who had always stood on his own 2 feet. Around 2 a.m., I picked up the phone and called David, my lawyer, waking him up. "It's done," I said, my voice low in the quiet house. He did it, he told me tonight. Told you what, Robert? David's voice was thick with sleep. The plan, assisted living, taking over the company. He announced it at my birthday dinner. There was a moment of stunned silence, then a heavy sigh. I'm sorry, Robert, I'm truly sorry it came to that. Don't be, I replied, a surprising calm flowing through me. He just handed me the moral justification for what I'm about to do. Is everything in place for the morning? Yes, David confirmed, his voice now crisp and professional. Marcus Thorne and his transition team will be at the main entrance of Harris Precision Works at 8 a.m. sharp. All relevant employees have been notified of a mandatory company-wide meeting. The sale is legally executed and filed. It's airtight. And the clause? I asked, needing to hear it one last time. The Ethan clause is Section 4, subsection B of the employment agreement, David recited, as if reading from the document itself. Retention of Ethan Harris is mandatory, contingent on his acceptance of a new role, logistics apprentice grade 1. He will report to the floor supervisor, Mr. Kowski. It's all there in black and white. I closed my eyes. Frank Kowski, a man who had started with me 35 years ago, a man of integrity, grit, and no-nonsense leadership. He had tried to mentor a young Ethan in the summers, but Ethan had dismissed him as a simple factory foreman. Now Ethan would be his subordinate. The poetry of it was not lost on me. I spent the next few hours building the case in my own mind, not for a jury but for myself. I thought of my employees, men and women who had mortgages, who were putting their children through college, who had dedicated their professional lives to Harris Precision Works. Ethan's reckless ambition would have destroyed their security. My deal with Marcus Thorne protected them. That was justice, part 1. I thought of my legacy. The name Harris on the building stood for something. It stood for quality, for a promise kept. Ethan would have sold that name to the highest bidder, some faceless private equity firm that would have stripped it for parts and sold off the brand. Marcus Thorne, for all our rivalry, understood the value of a name. He would preserve it, absorb it into his own respected enterprise. That was justice, part 2. And then I thought of Ethan. This was not just about punishment. I truly believed that. It was about salvation. I had handed my son everything on a silver platter, and in doing so, I had robbed him of the one thing that gives a man true character, the struggle. He had never known failure. He had never known what it felt like to start at the bottom and earn his way to the top. This demotion, as humiliating as it would be, was a gift. It was a chance for him to finally start over, to build something within himself that was real and lasting. It was a brutal, painful last-ditch effort to save my son's soul. That was justice, part 3. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in soft shades of gray and pink, I felt a sense of peace. The trap was not just a mechanism of revenge, it was an instrument of justice, carefully calibrated and aimed. The case was built not on legal documents alone, but on a foundation of moral necessity. I had done what a father and a CEO had to do. The outcome was now out of my hands. At 7:55 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in my kitchen, nursing a cup of black coffee. The sun was streaming through the window that overlooked Aliner's garden. It was a beautiful, ordinary morning. But 10 miles away, at the headquarters of Harris Precision Works, an extraordinary drama was about to unfold. I didn't need to be there to see it. I could picture the entire scene in my mind's eye as if I were watching a film. Ethan would arrive in his gleaming luxury SUV, a car purchased with the generous salary I paid him. He would stride through the glass doors with an air of unearned authority, nodding curtly to the receptionist. He'd be wearing one of his expensive, tailored suits, the unofficial uniform of the king assuming his throne. He would be anticipating a day of consolidation, of calling his investment bankers, of beginning the process of dismantling my life's work. But the lobby would be different today. Instead of the usual quiet hum of a workday beginning, there would be an unfamiliar tension. And standing by the reception desk, looking as if he owned the place, which of course he now did, would be Marcus Thorne. I could imagine the flicker of confusion on Ethan's face, quickly masked by his usual arrogance. He would likely assume Marcus was here for a meeting, a last-ditch effort to buy the company perhaps. Marcus, Ethan would say, extending a hand with a smug smile. To what do we owe the pleasure? If you're here to make an offer, you'll have to speak with me. I'm handling the disposition of my father's assets now. Marcus Thorne, ever the stoic, would ignore the offered hand. He would simply nod toward the conference room. Mr. Harris, we've been expecting you, please join us. The "we" would be the first real crack in Ethan's composure. He'd walk into the conference room to find not the familiar faces of his management team, but a group of strangers, Thorne's executive team, all looking at him with cool, appraising eyes. And sitting at the head of the table, in the chair that had been mine for 30 years, would be Marcus. "What is this?" Ethan would demand, his voice losing some of its smooth confidence. "This," Marcus would say, his voice calm and steady, "is a transition meeting. As of 9 p.m. last night, the sale of Harris Precision Works to Thorn Industries was finalized. I am the new owner of this company." The blood would drain from Ethan's face. The shock, the utter disbelief, would leave him momentarily speechless. His entire plan, his grand vision of seizing control, would evaporate in an instant. "That's impossible," he would stammer. "My father, he's unwell. He doesn't have the capacity to make that decision." "On the contrary," Marcus would reply, sliding a thick bound document across the polished table. "Your father was in exceptionally fine form. He negotiated a very thorough, very detailed agreement. It's all in there, signed, sealed, and legally unimpeachable." Ethan's eyes would dart around the room, searching for an ally but finding only the impassive faces of the new regime. His world would be tilting on its axis. But the worst was yet to come. "Now on to your position," Marcus would continue, pulling a single sheet of paper from a folder. "Per Section 4, Subsection B of the sale agreement, a condition insisted upon by your father, we are required to retain you as an employee." A tiny spark of hope might flicker in Ethan's eyes. Perhaps he could salvage this. Perhaps he could still hold a position of power. Marcus would slide the single sheet of paper over to him. "This is your new employment contract. Congratulations on your new role as Logistics Apprentice Grade 1. Your orientation is at 10 a.m. on the factory floor. Your supervisor will be Mr. Kowski. He'll issue you your uniform and safety equipment." I could see it so clearly, Ethan staring at the paper, the words blurring in front of his eyes. Logistics Apprentice, uniform, Mr. Kowski. The sheer, calculated, breathtaking humiliation of it all would wash over him in a sickening wave. The tailored suit would suddenly feel like a clown costume. The smug confidence would shatter into a million pieces, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage and shame. He would look up at Marcus, his face a mask of fury. "This is a joke. This is my father's doing." "Your father was very specific about this point," Marcus would say, his voice devoid of sympathy. "He believes a man should understand a business from the ground up. He's giving you that opportunity. Whether you take it or not is, of course, your choice. The contract is there. Be on the factory floor at 10 or security will escort you from the premises. The choice is yours." The showdown would be over. There were no more moves to make. No counteroffers, no arguments, no appeals, just a stark binary choice. My son, the self-proclaimed king, had been checkmated in the most public and absolute way imaginable. He was left with nothing but the ruins of his own arrogance and a job offer that was both an insult and, if he only had the wisdom to see it, a lifeline. It was just after 9:30 when I heard the screech of tires in my driveway. I didn't have to look. I knew it was Ethan. The front door burst open, slamming against the wall, and he stormed into the kitchen where I was still sitting, calmly sipping my coffee. His face was a mess of emotions, white with rage, red with humiliation. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie askew. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon through a nightmare. "You sold it," he gasped, his voice choked with disbelief. "You sold it to him." I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. "I secured its future, Ethan, and the future of the 300 people who depend on it." "And me?" he yelled, his voice cracking. "What about my future, a factory worker? You want me to wear a uniform? You did this to humiliate me." "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through his rage. "I did this to save you." I finally stood up and faced him, my son, this broken, furious man. "You see that company as a pile of money, Ethan. I see it as a community. You see the employees as expenses on a spreadsheet. I see them as families. You see leadership as a prize to be won. I see it as a responsibility to be earned. You are not ready for that responsibility." He just stared at me, his chest heaving. The anger was still there, but beneath it, I could see the first flicker of dawning comprehension. "I tried to teach you," I continued softly. "I tried to show you. But you and Vanessa, you were in too much of a hurry. You saw me as an obstacle. You stood in front of my friends and family on my 60th birthday and declared me obsolete. You tried to take my home, my work, and my dignity in one fell swoop." I walked over to the window and looked out at the garden. "Your mother and I built that company with our bare hands and our whole hearts. It was meant to be your legacy, yes, but a legacy is something you honor, not something you liquidate. You were going to destroy it." He was silent now, the fight draining out of him, replaced by the heavy weight of the truth. "So I made a choice," I said, turning back to him. I put the company in the hands of a man who, for all our differences, understands what it means to build something that lasts. And I gave you a chance, a real chance, not a handout. I looked him straight in the eye. The job is real, Ethan. The opportunity is real. You can learn that business from the bottom up. You can earn the respect of the men and women on that floor. You can one day become the leader I always hoped you would be, or you can walk away. The choice is entirely yours. For the first time in your life, your future is not my responsibility. It's yours. He sank into a kitchen chair, burying his face in his hands. The sound that came from him was a dry, broken sob. In that moment, he wasn't the predator from the restaurant. He was just a boy who had lost his way. I heard a car pull up outside, a taxi. A few moments later, Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter, a text message from Vanessa. I didn't need to read it. I knew what it would say. She was abandoning the sinking ship. She had no interest in being married to a man who worked on a factory floor. Ethan looked at the phone and let out a hollow laugh, his second betrayal of the day. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't offer a hug. The lesson had to be total. I simply left him there at the table to contemplate the wreckage of his choices. I walked into my study and closed the door. I don't know what he will do. I don't know if he showed up at the factory at 10 o'clock or if he walked away forever. But as I stand here now in the quiet of my home that is still mine, I feel a sense of peace. My legacy is safe, my people are protected, and my son, for better or for worse, is finally standing on his own 2 feet at the very bottom of a ladder he never knew existed. I have given him the greatest and hardest gift a father can give, a chance to become a man. The rest is up to him.